This is a demonstration of the HUMAC NORM isokinetic system software. What you'll find is the HUMAC software is not as pretty as the Biodex System 4 Pro software. However, it is just as fast, actually faster, when you consider the mechanical settings on the devices, and the reports are more informative. So I'm going to walk you through doing a test, previewing reports, generating a progress report, and a group summary report. So when you start the HUMAC NORM, test, exercise, report, and progress are grayed out because you need a patient. So we select patient. It's going to list the patient database. If I want to add a new patient, I'd press new. If I want to edit an existing patient, I just press edit. It'll open up the patient background information. Typical demographic fields. We use pull-down menus to standardize data entry. They can edit these menus by pressing edit list. And there are 2 extra fields to further define the patient. Once the patient background information is correct, we click OK. Now test, exercise, report, progress are all color because we have a patient. If we want to do a test, and we do, we're going to select test. It lists all the different patterns for the HUMAC NORM. There are 22 patterns: shoulder, elbow, wrist, hip, knee, ankle. If I want to do a knee extension flexion test, I simply highlight knee extension flexion, can double click it. It brings me to the protocol screen. You can create as many protocols as you like with the HUMAC NORM. You can mix and match different modes within a protocol. Also, once you've tested somebody, we show you the dates that the protocol was used for that patient. So for example, if we wanted to redo this test, we could just highlight that and click OK. This is the test status menu. You can test in any order you like. The right side or the left side first, the involved or the uninvolved, the high speed or the low speed. This protocol only has one speed, so we'll select single set. The first thing is to set up the norm, so the mechanical stops. These are the attachments that we use. These are my chair settings. These are my dynamometer settings, adapter settings. Click OK. Next, we need to set the anatomical position so the norm can measure range of motion. In this case, leg at full extension. Click OK. Then we need to set the range of motion. So there are 2 ways to do it with the norm. You can have them put their leg in extension, press EXT, put them in flexion, press FLX, or I can clear that. Track patient ROM, I just simply move their leg from the beginning of the range to the end of the range. We measure the end points. It tells us where to put the mechanical stops. Click OK. This protocol has a 1 repetition warm-up set. All done. We show them a timer. It has a 3 repetition protocol. And then when we're all done for this side, we go back to the test status window. If we want to do the other side, and we do, we're going to click left, single set. This is how I set my ROM stops, my attachments, including attachments that aren't available on the Biodex, like a contralateral pad. I set up my chair, my dynamometer, my adapters. I click OK. I set anatomical 0. And now for setting range of motion, I can do track patient ROM, I can do extension flexion, or I can also do, which is kind of cool, this mirror ROM, which will give me the range of motion from the other side. And if I match it, I get the exact same range of motion for this test. Researchers like that because they want to standardize the range of motion that patients travel for. Rehabilitation people don't use it because they use range of motion as an actual parameter to measure deficits. So set ROM, click OK. We're going to do our 1 repetition warm-up set, which looks like this. Now we're going to do the actual test, which looks like this. When you're all done with the second set, it's going to go back to the test status window. So it says tested, tested. If we want to preview the test, we could preview it. We're simply going to save it. The HUMAC has a variety of test reports. The most popular is the short form torque versus position. I'm going to show you this test because it has more data. I'm going to press preview. So what it'll do is it'll open up the test. Let me just shrink this down a little bit. There we go. All right, so name of the facility would be here. This is the test report. This is the patient background information. Extension, flexion, overlaid. If we start in flexion, you can see the person's symmetrical, so there's nothing to do here. If you look in extension, you can see the deficit is here. This is torque, this is position. So what's the extent of this deficit? If we go down here to peak torque, it's in foot-pounds. It could just as easily be in Newton-meters. With the HUMAC norm, you can toggle back and forth. We'll just change the data based on the preferences. So right side, left side, deficit at the bottom, 22%. End user sets the deficit threshold when the patient crosses it. We print it in red. Coefficient of variation is how consistent somebody is from rep to rep. Body weight ratio lets us compare people of different sizes. Work per repetition is the area under the curve. There's the 18% deficit there. And then the range of motion is pretty symmetrical, which is what we want. So if you looked at this report, what you would say is, we're not going to do flexion exercises. We're going to focus on extension exercises from this point to that point, which is about 95 to 40 degrees in the range of motion. But if you want to be a little more precise, you can click OK, select our overlay report, and what it does is it overlays the two sides, one on top of the other. So if we start in flexion, you can see the curves are symmetrical, and the difference curve runs along the bottom because there's no deficit here. But if we go to extension, you've got this problem. So maybe at 70 degrees is the biggest deficit. So we enter 70, and it says, yes, you have a 31% deficit there. You can adjust this if you like. And then you might look at where the deficit ends, probably about 35 degrees in the range of motion. Where does it start? Around 95. So for this patient, what you would say is, we're going to work on short arc extension exercises from 95 to 35 degrees in the range of motion. If you want to share the report with someone who's not familiar with isokinetic reports, such as the patient or perhaps a physician, what you can do is you can create what's called a narrative report. So the narrative report is where the user can create their own reports based on or using Microsoft Word. So for example, we can say that we want to use isokinetic concentric eccentric training to improve the rate of force development and increase strength. So we click OK, then we press preview, and what it does is it opens up our narrative report. So you see I dropped in the ProMed logo and address. So what it does is it grabs the patient's name, it grabs their pathology, this is all from the demographics, it grabs the protocol that we used, it grabs the most popular curve, so you can see the deficit, and then it says normal patients, less than 10%, no big deal, 15 to 20 could be abnormal, more than 20 probably, your patient did the following, patient would benefit from physical therapy to improve, this is the rate of force development and increased strength, my protocol would include isokinetic resistance, and Marcus would sign the report. So those are the three most popular reports with the HUMAC norm. If you wanted to send, for example, if it was a researcher and they wanted to send the data to Excel, they would simply click Excel, and what that would do is open up an Excel window. So time, position, torque, speed, gives them a little plot. So this is the raw data, sampling at 100 times a second for the researcher. They can also stream the data out in real time. I'm going to close this. Okay. There are other reports with the HUMAC norm. Those are the most popular test reports. Click OK. If you test a patient twice, the first thing they're going to say is, how did I do compared to the last time? So what you want is a progress report. So it's going to show you all the tests for that particular patient. So I'm going to pick what's called an initial test and put it up here. I'm going to look for a similar test using the same protocol and select follow-up test. I'm going to press preview, and what that'll do is it'll place the two test reports on the same page for comparison. So it overlays the curves, initial test, follow-up test, change between the two for the right and left side data. The last report that I'm going to show you with the HUMAC is what's called the group summary. So if a patient's been in a clinic for a while, sooner or later they're going to ask, how am I doing compared to other patients just like me? That's our summary program. So I click summary. What I do is pick a pattern. We'll say knee extension flexion. I pick a protocol that we did, maybe 2 speed. I want to add a group. So I'm going to give this a group. I'm just going to call it 1, 2, 3, 4. Click OK. I'm going to highlight that group right there. So what was previously the patient background information now becomes the search criteria. So here's where I can say things like, go find all my males, go find all my ACL patients, go find them with days post-injury or days post-surgery for a particular doctor or a particular sport or people that I tested. So any combination. All tests are most recent tests. That's if a patient has been tested more than once. How you want your data sorted. So in this type of comparison, you'd probably say involved versus uninvolved. You press summarize. So what it does is it runs through the database, it looks for all the knee tests using this protocol, filters based on that, groups it based on that, and then what you have over here are all the tests for this patient. So if he wants a comparison, you just grab one of their tests using the same protocol as this, press preview, and what it'll do is it'll compare that individual to the group. So what we see, individual, the search criteria, so this is the average of the group, this is what the patient did, and this is the difference between the patient and the group. So for this patient, we'd say, hey, good news, you're exceeding the group average for the tests that we've done for the patients that have gone through our clinic. So that's a quick tour of the HUMAC software. The purpose of this demonstration was to show you that, while not quite as fancy as the Biodex software, it's just as fast and faster when you consider the mechanical setup of the two devices. And also, if there was to be an update, and obviously there will be a HUMAC update, you can update your software, but you're not going to update your furniture without replacing your machine. So I hope you agree the HUMAC NORM is a much better device for your patients.